Now, the Turkish Prime Minister has shown he's not willing to back down yet over his controversial plans to bulldoze a park in Istanbul. Mr. Erdogan says redevelopment plans will go ahead despite a wave of unrest across the country. While he was away, his deputy had apologised for the heavy-handed way police handled the original protest last week. Well, with me is Basak Cali, who specialises in human rights and has just got back from Istanbul this morning and is a lecturer at University College London. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I just want to see, actually, I think we've got some live pictures of Istanbul, and let's float those pictures in now while we're talking, just so that we can get a flavour. Well, they're not going to come. They will eventually. Let's start with what you found when you were there. Were you surprised by the atmosphere?
I was surprised by the atmosphere in the sense that I didn't know the scale of police violence. I was just following the news from Twitter, but when I arrived there and started talking to people, I understood that it was much more of a wider scale attacks on protesters than I thought they were, just following the news myself.
And has this protest, and we now have the live pictures, which kind of always come when you sort of, I try to bring them in and they fail, and there they are. Are these protests about much more now than just about the redevelopment of the park?
I think so. I think they are. When you read the stories from Twitter and Facebook, because we can't really follow the stories from the Turkish news channels, one of the consensus is that when the police attacked the protesters at 5 a.m., I think it was the Saturday morning, that really started a big spark, and people did not understand why this attack was so severe, and I think that did spark much wider protests about this more general authoritarian tendencies of the government.
And I just wonder what you think is going to unfold now. I mean, has this protest reached its high water mark? Or now that Mr. Erdogan has said, you know what, the redevelopment of the park is going to go ahead and the protesters can, get lost, do you think then that will heighten the protests?
Well, I'm not it's an oracle kind of question. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I think that the protesters' demands have become a lot more clear in the past 3 or 4 days. So, and they're saying that, they want very serious investigations of all the police violence, including, direct attacks, severe beatings of a lot of women, actually, as well as men.
Well, there was a very famous photo, wasn't there, of one of the protesters, a woman in a red dress and a handbag over her shoulder being sprayed with pepper spray.
It's sprayed at a direct angle, and I think that's one of the important things, that the pepper spray is not supposed to be even used in that way. So that picture is actually evidence before a court in the way that the police was acting.
I suppose the other argument that needs to be put at times like this is that although we can probably see that on the streets there are several thousand people on the streets of Istanbul, and you can see them there are millions who aren't protesting, and Mr. Erdogan won a clear majority and a decisive majority in the elections recently.
Yes, and there are a lot of discussions about polls and that if there were an election tomorrow and the government may win, and they may indeed win. But of course, I think the message that I get from the protests is that the democracy is not just based on what comes out of the ballot box. It's also about respecting fundamental rights and freedoms. One of them is the right to peaceful protest and to be free from police brutality when you're airing these things. So. One of the things that came out of this protest is that I think the citizens are quite well aware that what they're doing is exercising a fundamental right of protest of government, which I think we should all, cherish and celebrate.
Dr. Basak Cali, thank you very much indeed for coming in almost straight from the airport from Istanbul. Very good to have you with us here. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you.